I'm Ben Wiedemann in Rome, and this is CNN.
It's 9 a.m. in New York as the debt ceiling deadline approaches. U.S. markets open in just 30 minutes. Will there be a last-minute solution? I'm Maggie Lake in New York. Nina Santos is in London, just over the River Thames from the financial district. And Pauline Chu is in Hong Kong. Welcome to World Business Today. Let's get you up to date on the latest in the debt ceiling crisis. The greatest hope for a solution right now lies in the Senate, where Democrats and Republicans are trying to reach agreement on a short-term fix. Even if a deal is struck, there is concern that conservative Republicans will try to slow its progress in the Senate. Another key question, will House Speaker John Boehner allow a Senate bill to come up for a vote in his chamber, the House? None of this sitting well with ratings agency Fitch. It has warned that it could put the U.S. pristine AAA rating, debt rating, it could change it, make changes to it or downgrade it. Despite all of this, U.S. futures are pointing to a solidly higher open on Wall Street. Investors are still holding out hope that Congress will get its act together. Athena Jones is live for us on Capitol Hill. Athena, another day of last-minute scrambling. Bring us up to date. It looks like the key is in the Senate, but could we get tripped up just by the timing, by the sort of procedural hoops that the chamber is going to have to go through?
Hi, Maggie. Well, that's the key question here. You mentioned markets being hopeful, and hopeful is the key word here today. We're looking like we did just about 24 hours ago at this moment. We were talking about a Senate deal, then a lot happened yesterday. Now we're talking about a Senate deal again, and we're told that they're very, very close to sealing this deal. What would it involve? It would involve reopening the government and funding it through January 15th, raising the debt ceiling until February 7th. It would also require that the committee sit down and talk about the budget to create a long-term budget deal, and also it would require income verification for those folks who are going to be getting subsidies to buy health insurance under Obamacare. So that's what the deal looks like now. The real question here, as you mentioned, is all about the process. Will this deal start in the House? Will the House take this up and vote on it first, which some have suggested they should, like Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, and even a Republican member of the House, Charlie Dent, said last night the House could go first. That could help expedite things and speed things up, of course, if it gets through the House. Does the deal start in the Senate? Have the Senate vote first? Then you face an issue of whether someone like Ted Cruz, who's held up matters in the past, would like to hold it up again. So that's what is still being worked out right now. And it's right now, I can tell you, as of this hour, it's still unclear where things are going to start. And of course, as you said, the time is ticking down. We only have a day to go. And it doesn't look like either way. It's a very, very real possibility that we could hit up on that deadline and things aren't resolved before tomorrow. But the White House says that if it looks as though a deal is very, very close to being finalized, that both houses are going to pass it, then hopefully the markets would see that as good news and not overreact. Maggie?
Yeah, and certainly the language coming from the Senate very much meant to reassure investors around the world. They're talking about being optimistic. But Athena, have we heard from this core group of conservatives any reaction, any kind of statement from them? Because all along, despite what we'd heard in the Senate, they remain defiant. Do they show any signs of having more of a cooperative mood today?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that. There was a conservative representative, Stephen King, from Iowa, who was on our air earlier today in an interview with New Day, who said that he's not prepared to vote on any plan, any deal that comes through in the next 36 hours. And he also said that this October 17th date is not that serious. It's just a date on the calendar. And so there's certainly a lot of people who feel like there's a little bit more time than the White House and the markets would like to say that there is. But of course, even the White House is saying that the October 17th might not cause a huge market reaction as long as it looks like a deal is close. So that's just one indication from one congressman. We also heard from a congresswoman on the Republican side who said to her party, put out a statement last night saying it's time for the party to face reality. It's time to reopen the government and lift the debt ceiling. So we're going to see some competing opinions here. The chief question, of course, is whether Speaker Boehner will put this bill on the floor, whether it starts in the House or starts in the Senate, bring it to a vote and allow allow a vote on it, and then what will happen with that vote. Certainly, CNN's past vote counts have indicated support for what was then a clean spending bill with no strings attached. And so the thinking is, if Speaker Boehner puts something on the floor, it should probably pass, but there's no way to know for sure what's going to happen. Maggie?
All right, we're going to sit and watch and wait, just like everyone. Athena, thank you for bringing us up to date on the very latest. Let's do the same when it comes to investor sentiment. Zain Asher is on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. And Zain, investors seem to be taking this all in stride for the moment, betting on the fact there will be a deal.
Yeah, absolutely. They do seem to be blocking out the noise from Washington. We are seeing blind optimism here. Futures were just up about 100 points. Definitely not what anyone expected. I do have some earnings to report to you quickly, though, Maggie. Investors certainly breathing a sigh of relief for Bank of America. The company is swinging to a $2.5 billion profit in the third quarter, topping expectations there, but missing on revenue. Despite the drama in Washington, the CEO, Brian Moynihan, says that the economy and business climate will improve even more quickly as conditions normalize. He's also adding that Bank of America is well positioned to benefit from that. When you compare it to other big banks, though, like JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo and Citi, they did also suffer from a slowdown in mortgage lending that weighed on sales. But unlike many of the others, Bank of America actually saw higher sales in its consumer banking franchise, particularly in small business lending. Bank of America slightly higher at the open. I do also want to mention that stocks overall, as we were talking about, do seem to be in a good mood this morning. Investors certainly believe that a deal will be struck on the debt ceiling. Also, as well, despite Fitch placing the U.S. on negative watch, they did say a number of times in their statement, Maggie, that they do not expect a default. They kept on emphasizing that. And lastly, even though a lot of investors know that tonight is, in theory, the deadline, they know that the U.S. does still have enough money on hand to pay its bills for some time. The U.S. Government Accountability Office is saying until the end of the month at least. Maggie?
All right, Zain Asher, thank you so much. And Nina, obviously a little easier for investors on this side because they're familiar with the mechanisms of government, and unfortunately they've seen this play out before. Must be a little bit more disconcerting, though, if you're sitting abroad watching this all.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just come back from taping an interview with a hedge fund manager who says, look, we're having to read the Washington Post and hang on its every word. This isn't how we normally trade the markets. So behind me, the City of London has around about over $1.7 trillion worth of securities and forex trades that go down every single day. So what happens in Washington definitely matters here. Let's have a look at how it's affecting the markets. As you were saying before, Maggie, a lot of people hoping that there will be some 11th hour deal here. London FTSE 100 down only by around about 0.5%, etc. DAX down also in Frankfurt, and the markets in Zurich and Paris down, but Paris not by that much. We did have some new data out today on the jobless front. That was better than expected, showing the sharpest drop in unemployment claims in the UK in about 16 years. Hasn't been enough to steady the markets. But let's not see what I have to say over here. Let's have a look at what Isa Suarez has been gathering from on the other side of the river, about half a mile from here. She's been standing at the trading floor of CMC Markets in the city, which is around about behind that building over there. Isa, what are traders saying over there? Are they nervous? How are they taking things?
Well, a bit like the markets, Nina, that you've just gone through. I think they're a bit unmoved. It's a bit disappointment. It's a bit of a hold and wait kind of pattern there. They're waiting to see what will happen later on today, Nina. What we are seeing, though, I think one trader was saying to me, he feels like he's going a bit hypnotized, just looking at his screen, waiting for something to happen. Despite the lack of drama, though, we are, you know, that they do believe that a deal will come through. And there are frustrations and bewildered. Some are really bewildered at the fact that the US economy, the world's biggest economy, you know, the government has been so poor. They haven't been able to sort this issue quickly enough. I mean, we're in the third week, really. But the mood is pretty divided. One of the traders I was talking to basically said to me, well, a deal will be done and will be done by the deadline, which will be tomorrow. It won't be the deal they want. It will be like a short-term fix, and there will be lots of honeyed words, but it will be done, and we'll be back on the table, back again talking about this come January, February. One of our regular viewers, Michael Houston, who you and I know very well, as well as viewers of WBT, will know that, you know, he took a different stance. He said, actually, don't expect anything tomorrow or the weekend, perhaps Monday if we're lucky. So it's taking a different approach. He thinks, you know, this is not going to be done in time. The markets are just taking all in their stride. But then if a deal's not reached, that would definitely hit them on Monday. And when I asked him why markets have been so muted in many ways, Nina, he basically said to me, you know, the world's biggest economy and really the world's biggest currency, and people really believing that they'll get through this. So if push comes to shove, a deal will be done.
Yeah, in fact, as you were just highlighting there, the yield on US bonds also is something that so many securities are priced on, so it does have a ramification. Thank you very much. That's Isa Suarez there from the trading floor of CMC Markets. And Pauline, I'm sure that investors over in Asia will have a keen eye on this because the Chinese own a huge amount of US treasuries, as indeed do the Japanese.
Yeah, that's right. The Chinese own $1.3 trillion worth, and all of Asia holds more than $3 trillion worth of U.S. debt. So the investors here are certainly very concerned, and markets across Asia reflected that as they were mixed today as investors waited for a resolution to the crisis in Washington. Now, Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index fell almost 0.5%, and the Shanghai Composite shed about 2%, and it dropped right after the open. Remember, China is the largest foreign holder of U.S. debt, more than $1 trillion, and it does have the most to lose if their value slides. Now, China has been urging the U.S. to get its act together, but official media are also taking the opportunity to attack the dominance of the U.S. in global markets. An editorial by China's official Xinhua news agency on Sunday called for a new world order, warning other nations to be less reliant on the U.S. David McKenzie tells us more.
Deal or no deal? With just hours to go to a U.S. default, foreign leaders are getting very nervous indeed. If the debt ceiling is breached and the U.S. can't pay its bills, China, the largest foreign owner of U.S. debt, will be one of the biggest losers. The Chinese economy would have enormous exposure to a default. This country owns more than $1 trillion of U.S. Treasury bills, and economists tell me that officials at the People's Bank of China are preparing for a doomsday scenario, a default that would cause a global chain reaction.
So you have a start with the liquidity risk, then you have a credit risk, and also on this kind of chain reaction. I would imagine that if U.S. does default its debt, the consequence probably is going to be 10 times more serious than the Lehman Brothers go under. So the consequence is just enormous.
With unthinkable consequences, most economists still believe that U.S. lawmakers will broker a deal to avoid an unconstrained default. But the threat of a default has given Chinese state media a huge PR opportunity. Xinhua proclaiming that the U.S. fiscal failure warrants a de-Americanized world.
For the past several years, Beijing has been trying to project this soft power, namely that the China model perhaps is the best for the world, particularly for developing countries. So this fiscal mess, which Washington has gotten into, I think, has provided them with a good excuse and ample ammunition to shoot down the so-called American consensus.
It's a message that the Communist Party hopes plays well at home and abroad. And it pushes their agenda as the world's second largest economy to have more fiscal clout on the world stage. China's wildly successful export-driven economy creates enormous cash surpluses. And for decades, the US has been the only market big enough and safe enough for China's technocrats to park much of that cash and help their own export market thrive. Even with the debt ceiling shambles, China doesn't have a quick fix alternative.
Unless Chinese government willing to switching from export-driven model towards more consumption or more balanced growth model, you don't have much choice, in fact.
A long-term goal of the Chinese government, yes. In the short term and even the medium term, China will have to put up with DC's dysfunction because it still needs US debt just as much as the US needs China's cash. David McKenzie, CNN Beijing.
It's down to the wire in Washington, so why are stocks set to rally at the open? We'll ask a trader right after the break here on World Business Today.
This is Malawi, the warm heart of Africa. Adventure with your heart and soul in the warm heart of Africa. Destination Malawi.
Aiming for gold. Join a global journey that ends at the Sochi Games. This month, get into the mindset of Olympic hockey players.
It's a different type of feeling that you can speak your native language all the time.
And
it was tough today.
it's extremely hard. Training for skiing in the summer. Aiming for gold. Saturday on CNN in association with Russian Railways.
These are the wrecks of just some of the vessels that have brought thousands of immigrants here to Lampedusa.
This is taking you to the heart of the story.
You can see some of the refugees have left items of clothing, a pair of jeans here. You get a sense that if you imagine hundreds of people crammed onto this ship, just how desperate those making that dangerous journey from North Africa to here must be.
This is CNN. The table is set for you to get a different view of China.
Join me for an intimate and revealing discussion with people who know China better than anyone.
This month on China, cracking down on political corruption.
You mentioned for the Chinese Communist Party, fighting corruption is a matter of life and death. Why is it a matter of survival for the party? Why is it that critical?
It's a view from the inside out. On China, today only on CNN.
Congress right now is playing Russian roulette, not just with the U.S. economy, but with the global economy. The global economy functions with the U.S. at its core, and within the core are U.S. treasuries. So if you start threatening the standing of U.S. Treasury, you cause major systemic risk. Now, we've seen some damage in terms of economic activity, but that will be nothing compared to what would happen if the U.S. were to default on its debt. Now, this is not going to happen in the short term, but the closer they get to the stage where they run out of money, the greater the market is going to start functioning really badly.
That's why the Russians, the Chinese, and some of the other people are starting to say, okay, we've got to figure out something to at least compete with the U.S. dollar, if not replace the U.S. dollar. And you're sitting here in Asia, especially where they have huge assets. The largest creditor nations in the world are China, Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, and they're sitting saying, why are we financing these guys who keep going deeper and deeper into debt? Let's figure out an alternative. Wouldn't you?
Some pretty stark words there. Let's get a trader's perspective on all of this. I'm joined by Scott Shalady, Senior Vice President of Derivatives at Trine Group. He joins us from the CME Group in Chicago. Scott, great to see you. Explain to us, many people confused after hearing words like that, why stocks are up. What's going on? What do you guys see?
Well, I mean, the traders behind me and the folks that we speak to on an everyday basis believe that it's such a bad outcome. This whole idea of a default is such a bad outcome that they can't possibly be that ignorant and let something like that happen. So the markets have been fairly immune to it. So, which also worries me that if there is some crazy reason why our legislators would like to push that button, because let's not make it, that's the nuclear option. There's no coming back from that. So if that happens, they think that they've got Obamacare and the debt ceiling to worry about. Well, if that button's pushed and we do default, they've got a lot more to worry about. So I think that's actually something that could put them all out of work. That's what the market's telling us. There's going to be a deal because they're just not that ignorant.
Exactly. The mantra that I woke up saying to myself this morning, Scott, and I'm going to say all day, is this is an issue of stupidity. It is not an issue of solvency, which is what we were dealing back in 2008. Unfortunately, we've kind of been saying that every day, thinking that they'd all come to their senses, and yet we keep creeping closer. At what point, I know that there's been a lot of debate over days, and the date of the 17th maybe isn't firm in the stand. I think markets have kind of sussed that out, which is why they're also a little bit calm as we push up against the deadline. What date is going to make you nervous, and where are you watching? You guys deal with derivatives. I know there's a lot of concern, not in the equity market, but that we're going to start to see the strains in repo market, in derivatives, in places that are kind of harder for ordinary people to see.
I think we could see, in a really bad scenario, this last out over the weekend, but my drop-dead date is Monday. I hate using the term the government's going to run out of money, because if you ask me, I think we ran out of money $17 trillion ago. So we got an issue that I think that if we take this all the way till next Monday, the markets will also start to tell us too. So as the markets start to really kind of get us nervous, and I hate to see the politicians react to that, but ultimately that might be the case. You know, we got something across our desk here this morning that said that the Washington Redskins American football team was thinking about dropping part of their name because it was offensive and embarrassing. So they're now just going to be called the Redskins. So we're frustrated just like the rest of America is, and we need to get something done so we can get on the business with financing and risk management.
Absolutely, and you bring up all good points. I mean, the level of frustration, I think, is beyond what any of us thought we were able to sort of actually feel. Scott, though, we are starting to see banks, financial institutions take precautions, including where you're sitting at the CME. They've increased their margins. Customers need more cash on hand. This will also increase, won't it, as the days go on? Is that disruptive in and of itself?
It's absolutely disruptive, and it makes things more difficult to get done. And, you know, we're making decisions in a vacuum. And you know what? Who can plan for something that's never happened before? I mean, in over 200 years, this has never happened before. And all the catastrophes and wars that we've had, this has never happened before. So I think you can gauge my frustration. I've been doing this for 25 years. I haven't had to, you know, manage anything like this before ever, and I don't want to. So these guys need to see that, and they know that that's a nuclear option. They can't actually hit that button. I think that's what the market's still kind of telling us, but you'll start to see this degradation over the next 3 or 4 days, and then maybe into the weekend if they don't get a deal done soon, because I think my drop-dead date is still next Monday.
And what makes me mad is it's the average person out there, the pensioner, who's going to lose money, get scared, pull money out of the market. Again, they're the ones that are hurt, even if Wall Street just sends a warning, not the professional investors. That's the tragedy of this all. But hey, we can vote. They don't deserve their jobs, any of them. Scott, thank you so much for coming on and spelling it out for us, putting it in perspective. We so appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon. Pauline?
Maggie, I think the quote of the day is the U.S. Ran out of money $17 trillion ago. That was great. Well, you're watching World Business Today. Intel's earnings weren't spectacular, but its CFO is still optimistic about the future. He'll tell you why in just a moment.
For centuries, the book has been the very symbol of learning. Yet throughout history, there's always been one small problem. The knowledge inside these books has only been within reach of a select few. But now that your SIM card can be your library card, all these books are available on any mobile device, which means they can reach people and places they never could before. So say goodbye to the book as we know it and say welcome to the new world.
It's a new dawn in Africa, and our enormous potential and opportunities have been harnessed by one bank. UBA, United Bank for Africa, stands strong as the bank of choice for Africans and Africa-related businesses, uniting African people and businesses with the world. So make the wise choice today. Bank with UBA, Africa's global bank.
I think what's happening in Washington is irresponsible and dangerous. Anything that puts to question the fact that the U.S. would pay its debt is not a good thing. So far, I think the market reaction has been pretty muted. Hopefully this gets resolved fast.
Our Richard Quest spoke to Stacy Smith, that was them right there, after the results of Intel. And Richard joins us now. Richard, you've been talking to CEOs all week about this. They're frustrated. They're telling us, but nobody in Washington seems to be listening to them.
No, they're not. And what they're also saying is, as you heard Stacy Smith, irresponsible, dangerous, worrying, likely to cause a breach of confidence. Their customers are not making investment or purchasing decisions, all the things that you would expect when there is so much uncertainty. But like the finance ministers and central bankers at the IMF in Washington last week, they are powerless even to have influence over the debate, because this is a political debate in Washington, not an economic or financial one.
Richard, it's Nina here in London. It's not the first time, Richard, that we've seen political debates scupper the economy, if you like. We were here 1.5 years, 2 years ago in Europe talking about exactly the same type of scenario. How can companies like Intel actually plan for that? It must be very difficult.
They plan just on the basis of continuing to do what they can. They have a contingency plan. I mean, I've asked various companies, and they won't say publicly, do you have a contingency plan? Well, they pretty much say, what are you having a contingency for? I mean, yes, you can plan to have more cash on hand. You can plan not to need to issue debt in such dangerous markets. You can plan to make sure that you know where your debts and your liabilities are in case things turn nasty. But that's a bit like having an umbrella for a rainy day. Here, on this occasion, we don't just know whether it's going to rain. Well, we don't know if it is going to rain. We don't know how bad it's going to rain. And we don't know if it's going to turn into a Force 10 hurricane.
You know, Richard, the lasting thing, it will be interesting to see. The Republican Party has always been the party of business in the U.S., in this country. They funnel a lot of contributions that way. Money talks. It'll be interesting long-term to see whether that remains the case, because a lot of CEOs upset that they're not getting their phone calls taken. Richard Quest is going to continue to talk to them throughout the week as well as tonight. Richard, great to see you as always, and we've got the opening bell next. Stay with us.
அடிக்கடி கரண்ட் ஆஃப் ஆறதுனால நான் கடையை மூடிடலான்னு இருந்தேன். ஆனா இன்னைக்கு பிசினஸ் எக்ஸ்பேன்ஷன் பண்ணலாம்னு முடிவு பண்ணிருக்கேன்.
Ardhi hii ilikuwa tasa. Hakuna maji, hakuna chakula. Kisha siku moja maisha yetu ilibadilika.
People ask how I keep smiling in such a critical place. I say thanks to Kirloskar.
Kirloskarக்கு நன்றி. அது என் வாழ்க்கையை மாத்திடுச்சு.
Kilota ilibadilisha hatima yetu.
I'm a Golf Citizen.
I am a Golf Citizen.
Golf Citizen is an online golf booking platform that lets you book in real time with no extra fees. With instant confirmation, you spend less time planning and more time playing.
I'm a Golf Citizen. Are you?
GolfCitizen.com. Search, book, play.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the land of FC Barcelona, where ground temperature is currently excited, reaching feverish around kickoff. The weather was brought to you by Qatar Airways, proud partner of FC Barcelona.
On the next Open Court, it's a workout to remember. World number 4 David Ferrer runs Pat through the paces.
I was the fittest player in tennis 25 years ago.
Plus, fearless on court and off. See how the sky's the limit for Swiss star Stan Wawrinka. Open Court. Thursday on CNN. In association with Rado. CNN original series Anthony Bourdain Parts Unknown, Sicily.
Our octopus. Cuttlefish. Pancetta. Leonata. Oh, that looks good. This cheese. How do you say it in Italian? Swordfish. Looks like hell. Tastes like heaven. Smells good in here. Chin. Caponata. That's old school. That's Sicily right there.
Anthony Bourdain Parts Unknown, Sicily. Only on CNN.
I'm Becky Anderson in London, and this is CNN.
There is the opening bell at the NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange. Stocks open for business, and it looks like we're going to get a bounce. Welcome back to World Business Today. We are live from Hong Kong, London near the financial district today, and New York. We were looking at futures indicating perhaps close to a triple-digit gain. Seems to be bizarre considering the fact that we are getting so close to bumping up that all-important debt ceiling. But as we heard Scott Shellady just tell us from Chicago, traders refuse to believe that politicians are dumb enough and reckless enough to hit that button, which he says is a nuclear option. So Wall Street hanging on to hope that sense will prevail in Washington and we will get a deal. So right now some calm, but we should caution against complacency, Pauline. That would be dangerous. No deal yet, but we're continuing to track the progress. But Pauline, a lot else going on in the world, isn't there?
Yeah, that's right. We'll get back to business news in just a moment. Here are the top world news stories that we're following, starting with the situation in Syria. A Syrian human rights group says 21 people have been killed in the southwestern city of Dara. The London-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says an explosive device hit a truck carrying civilians. They were reportedly traveling through an area controlled by pro-government forces. The group says 6 women and 4 children are among the dead. In the Philippines, the death toll from a powerful earthquake that struck on Tuesday has risen to 144. The hardest hit areas were the islands of Bohol and Cebu. Nearly 300 are injured. Authorities say there are fears more than 20 people are still trapped underneath fallen buildings. Protests broke out at the funeral of a former Nazi SS officer near Rome. Erich Priebke was serving a life sentence under house arrest for his role in the killing of 335 civilians during the Second World War. He died last week at the age of 100. Both his hometown in Germany and Argentina, where he took refuge after the war, had refused to take his body for burial. There will be new faces at the Football World Cup when it kicks off in Brazil next year. Bosnia-Herzegovina made it to the finals for the very first time by winning their last qualifying match on Tuesday. The country played its first match as an independent nation just 18 years ago, Maggie.
Wow, a lot of incitement in that crowd there. Congress is running out of time to reach a debt ceiling solution. It is a story that is dominating the markets today. If no action is taken, the U.S. could at some point default on its debt for the first time ever. Now, if Congress misses the deadline, the U.S. Treasury will still have about $30 billion on hand to pay its bills. That money, though, is going to run out fast. The Bipartisan Policy Center a payment of around $12 billion is due on October 23rd. Another $25 billion is due on November 1st, but that's just one piece of the government's obligations. On October 30th, it needs to pay $2 billion in Medicare payments to health care providers. And the following day, the Treasury has to pay out $6 billion in interest on debt, coincidentally falling on Halloween. CNN political contributor Ryan Lizza joins us from Washington now. Ryan, a lot of people have been, making jokes about just how scary this whole thing is and the fact that Halloween seems to be a deadline. When you were on with us yesterday, you really called it. Everyone was optimistic in the morning, and then it just devolved into chaos in Washington all day long. Investors unsettled by that. We sort of are in the same situation again, where people are even more optimistic that a deal is going to get done. Will it happen this time?
Yeah, the markets so far don't seem to be that concerned. They have more confidence, I think, than some of us in Washington that this will all work out. Look, what happened yesterday is that the faction in the House of Representatives that has pushed us to the brink, the back of that faction was broken. That's what happened last night. The House of Representatives gave up, and that's why today people are optimistic that finally the deal that was taking shape in the Senate as of Sunday night is back on track. It can pass the Senate, and then most political observers believe, but nothing is certain in this town, that the House will be forced to take up that deal and pass it. Two caveats. One, in the Senate, anyone can object to moving forward today on an expedited basis with this bill. And if that happens, that's going to push us past the Thursday deadline. So all eyes will be on folks like Ted Cruz and Mike Lee and other senators who have pushed us into the shutdown to see if they unanimously or to see if they object to moving forward today in the Senate. The second caveat
Ryan,
of
we'll get to that second caveat. I just wonder. It does seem like it sort of lies on these, again, this hardcore group using procedural movements to sort of try to have their voice heard and delay things again.
Absolutely.
It's so frustrating for us ordinary people. The votes are there to avoid the nuclear option. At some point, can't they all just stand up and say, this is crazy? I mean, can they break with tradition? Can they break the rules and just sort of have an up and down? Somehow there must be a way to just get this thing done.
I know it seems crazy, but in our system, especially in Congress, there are an awful lot of parliamentary roadblocks built into the system. And if you combine that with a group of conservatives who philosophically are not convinced, I know this sounds crazy, but there's a group of folks in Congress who believe that going against this deadline is not such a big deal. So if you combine those two things, you have a recipe for a system that is okay with pushing things to the brink. Now, I think two things that happened yesterday is, one, the House just completely failed to pass anything, and two, we got a very scary warning from Fitch that said basically what Fitch said is our political system is screwed up, and they worry that we are on the road to default. That caught the attention of a lot of politicians, including the Speaker of the House, John Boehner.
And might give him, Ryan, the cover he needs, which is what people were saying all along, to say, oh, everything they warned about is actually happening. Now we have to move. So let's hope that was enough cover and we don't have to see the stock market tank for them to get their act together. But Ryan, thank you very much.
That's right, because that'll do it.
Yeah, exactly. But we don't want that to happen because it's insane. No. Ryan, thank you so much. We'll talk to you throughout the day as we watch the procedural movements. Nina, I'm going to toss it back to you. And again, this has got to be the very frustrating thing, is that you can have that sort of small minority sort of delay things and start to have the markets react in a negative way for people watching from the outside.
Absolutely. If you read today's Financial Times, the commentator Martin Wolf famously said, well, the debt ceiling is like a nuclear bomb with its target aimed at America, but its blast radius is effectively the rest of the world. And nobody's been hurt more by the concerns surrounding America. Also, the fact that the Fed could turn off the taps of quantitative easing than the emerging markets. I'd like now to bring in our next guest, Ruben Aganbayan. He's a former president of the Moscow Stock Exchange, no less. He's now the CEO of the #2 private banking group in Russia, Ukritia Financial. Thank you very much for coming on World Business Today. Obviously, the weather gives us a bit of a dreary backdrop, and the conversation's going to be difficult because we have to address the US debt ceiling.
Yes.
Many of your clients are rich private banking clients. They must be worried if they've got their money in dollar assets.
I think, to be honest, till probably quite late now. Nobody believed that the situation will develop till last couple of hours, and we'll be kind of really waiting and watching how it will develop, because nobody thought the US government and the Senate and the House will be as irresponsible as they are right now. Russia, in my opinion, has two sides to it. One is obviously the private clients, not just rich, but overall. Second is the government itself, because a lot of its reserves are actually tied up in the treasury bills.
Yes, Russian government.
Russian government
particular.
and central bank treasury reserves.
So we've seen how Russia was affected in 2008 after the collapse of Lehman Brothers. You yourself were in the stock exchange then. You were the president of the stock exchange at a time when it merged with the other big stock exchange. Yeah. Is this similar? Could this really tilt things that much for Russia?
Not. We hope not. But Russia is part of the global economy, that's for sure. Russian clients depend on borrowing in the West from the international investors. Russia has a lot of debt. This debt is priced from the treasury bills, like all the debt in the world. And obviously that's... I think the whole world will be impacted if this does not get resolved now. I mean, we actually hope that it will.
So, if you can't find safety in U.S. treasuries, where do you find safety?
That's a big question. In our view, that's basically, we all know that there's basically two systems which offer some kind of safety. One is US dollar-based system, another is euro-based system. I don't think there's any other currency or market which is ready to actually absorb that amount of cash, except one of the markets comes to mind is obviously gold.
Which has had a rocky road of late, especially the last 2 days.
Exactly. And but otherwise, in order to be the reserve currency, not to be the reserve system, you need to have the width and the depth of the instruments and the market for people to feel safe. I don't think yuan, I don't think ruble, I don't think really any other currency can offer what that has.
47.7% of the US total debt pile out there is owned by investors outside of the United States. Is the US playing fast and loose with its credibility here?
In my opinion, it is, because basically, as I said, till the last few days, everybody really believed, everybody believes it's all kind of political games, and we're not experts on the US, so I wouldn't argue. I think you have much more qualified people to discuss that. But what's concerning is that this has all been brought till the deadline, and this is a concern for the future. Now, there's been a lot of concerns for the future in the past, 2008 crisis, other situations, but reality is that to develop a system like US has, in terms of depth, in terms of number of investors, people believe it takes years, and therefore, basically everybody kind of tries to forget and moves on.
All right, Ruben Aganbayan, thank you so much for that.
The
CEO of Okritiye Financial there, also somebody who used to run the major stock indices over in Russia. And I might point out, Pauline, as you and I well know, this trend has been affecting the world's emerging markets. Billions of dollars have poured out of the emerging markets even before the debt debacle went down to the umpteenth hour.
Yeah, we saw international investors pulling money out back in May and June as soon as Ben Bernanke had indicated that the Fed may start tapering, but that's not a word we hear very often anymore, tapering. So it's interesting how the subject of the conversation has shifted now. Well, as we've explored this hour, Nina, the U.S. government shutdown is being felt all around the world. The gridlock on Capitol Hill is even reaching across oceans to hallowed grounds. CNN's Jim Bitterman reports from France on the disappointment and the frustration outside the locked gates of U.S. military cemeteries.
For the first time in 2 weeks at the U.S. military cemetery in Suresnes, France, there was mowing going on. The government shutdown, which closed 24 military cemeteries around the world, was still in effect. But shutdown or no shutdown, the superintendent here figured he could delay the grounds maintenance no longer, even though technically he is off the clock.
We take care and pride in our headstones and on the grounds. We want to do this also for the men and women that are buried here. These people sacrificed their lives for our country, okay? The least we can do is take care of them. And so
in normal times, the cemeteries, which are operated by the U.S. Battle Monuments Commission and stretch from Normandy to the Philippines, attract hundreds of thousands of visitors each year. Relatives and friends of the fallen plan their trips to pay homage long in advance. But in recent days, if they didn't see the brief notice on the Commission's website or hear about the shutdown ahead of time, they were in for a disappointment. At the big military cemetery in Normandy near Omaha Beach, emotions over the past 2 weeks have run high.
We traveled all the way here to see this cemetery, and we get this. I am never voting for Republicans again, ever.
And it is not just Americans who've been put out by the closings.
If there's a problem between the different parties, why should it affect a cemetery?
Sverker Weisglass from Sweden drove his ailing father here to visit the D-Day beaches and cemetery, one of his last wishes, which Weisglass now thinks may not be fulfilled.
If there's time, there might be a possibility, but I doubt it.
A deal in Washington, according to the superintendent here, would allow him to pretty much immediately open these gates. But the shutdown felt around the world has already taken not only an economic toll, but an emotional one, far outside America's borders. Jim Bitterman, CNN, Suresnes, France.
And after the break, we've got more on the impact of the crisis in Washington. The head of one of the world's biggest hotel chains tells me what the stalemate is doing to business.
Watch the greatest players on Earth. Enjoy the greatest weekend on Earth. See history being made. The race ends here in Dubai. Register for tickets at www.dpworldtourchampionship.com.
In 1692, the first modern wallet was created, and for more than 300 years, the wallet has served us well. But here's the thing. Now that your SIM card can replace all your other cards, you can put the wallet into the mobile phone, where you can keep more cash, cards, and contacts than the humble wallet ever could. So say goodbye to the wallet and say welcome to the new world.
Aiming for gold. Join a global journey that ends at the Sochi Games. This month, get into the mindset of Olympic hockey players.
It's a different type of feeling that you can speak your native language all the time.
And
It was tough today.
it's extremely hard. Training for skiing in the summer. Aiming for gold. Saturday on CNN in association with Russian Railways.
Tonight on CNN, International Desk with Hala Garani, followed by Armanpur. Then CNN News Center with Aisha Sasay. It's your new evening lineup. Tonight on CNN. Expedition Sumatra. Philippe Cousteau leads us on an epic trek into a world under threat.
This really is ground zero for the global fight against deforestation.
Join Expedition Sumatra, Saturday only on CNN.
It's extraordinarily frustrating. So you think about the crisis we had in the middle of 11, the crisis we had at the end of 2012, the crisis we have today, and they're all really about politics. They're not about the substance of what we have to do with our fiscal issues.
And that was Arne Sorensen, president and CEO of Marriott International, criticizing the politicians in the U.S. debt crisis. I asked him how the political paralysis in Washington is directly affecting his business and the wider economy.
There are markets like Washington, D.C., where the government shutdown is having an impact on hotels in that market. But again, it's kind of frustrating because the economy in the United States is broadly growing. And really, it's this threat which is holding it back.
Now, I read one of your blogs on your website, and you've even suggested holding off on political contributions to both parties. I mean, you're serious about that. You're that frustrated. I
am. I think we've seen our politicians move to the two extremes, and part of that is about gerrymandering and other things in the U.S. I think part of it may also be about the parties demanding an adherence to a certain theory as opposed to practical problem solving. And so I threw out as an idea, go ahead and give money to politicians you believe in, that's fine. But maybe we should not give money to parties. Maybe we should not give monies to folks who are too extreme either direction. Let's give money to folks who are going to actually solve the problems that are confronting the country.
Let's talk about Asia, and you are visiting several different countries. China, obviously a huge market for you. Are you expanding rapidly within China, or has the growth in China affected what your plans are?
Well, in the short term, in some markets, there's some impact of slower economic growth this year, but generally, this is still a market which is rich with growth opportunities for us. So, a couple of statistics. There are fewer than 2 million hotel rooms in China today. There are 5.5 million hotel rooms in the United States. Economies are not that different in aggregate size. Obviously, economies per capita are very different from place to place. So what we've done, we opened our 21st hotel in Shanghai earlier this year, biggest operator in Shanghai, but we're opening our first hotel in Chengdu, for example, this month, the Ritz-Carlton there. And increasingly, we'll see our growth go to the second-tier cities, but we'll grow as the Chinese economy grows over the next decades.
And Sorensen also says that he'd like to see the U.S. make the visa process easier for Chinese travelers. It takes an average of 4 days to get a visa, whereas some European countries take much less time. And that affects travel itineraries and ultimately the volume of hotel stays. And speaking of people who have enough money to travel internationally, China's super rich have gotten richer in the last year. Forbes magazine says it's been a record year for the country's mega wealthy. It has named 168 billionaires, which is not bad for a communist country, and says that's more than China has ever had before. The combined fortunes of the top 100 shot up 44% in the last 12 months to $316 billion. And at the top of this list is this man, the real estate mogul Wang Jianlin, who runs the Dalian Wanda Group. Now, last year, his company bought the U.S. cinema chain AMC for $2.6 billion. He's also building a huge Hollywood-like complex in Qingdao, China, in eastern China, Nina. And to use the analogy of movie making, I mean, what's going on in Washington could be a cliffhanger with a twist of horror in there.
It certainly could, Pauline. Well, coming up next on World Business Today, speaking of Washington and important buildings, it seems as though everyone has an opinion on what's going on inside this very building and the possibility, of course, of a US default. We'll take a look at what some people are saying in various parts of the globe.
Sail in time with Rolex, supporter of the International Sailing Federation.
New Zealand won the start and led the early phase of this huge stakes race. But Oracle had something special. Their boat was now simply faster upwind.
And at this point on the race course, the Americans have taken the lead by 20 meters. Big cross with the Americans having the right of way, and they will make the cross.
That means that's about a 3 boat length gain over the last minute and a half. It's a big jump for Oracle.
And the Americans never looked back. They just went on increasing their lead.
The Stars and Stripes say it all. The comeback of 2013 is complete. America's Cup will stay in America.
Oracle had made the greatest comeback in America's Cup history.
Why this watch? This watch has seen gale force winds, incredible sights, and craft and crew become one. It's marked the most challenging seas, the longest nights, and charted a course for the bravest of brave. It doesn't just tell time, it tells history.
Just when you thought Congress couldn't possibly do any less, somehow they managed to do even worse than nothing. It's almost inspiring. At this point, our government is like the house on Halloween that turns all its lights off and just leaves a bowl of candy on the front porch.
Jimmy Kimmel there talking about the shutdown. I want to point out, too, stocks triple-digit gains right now. The Dow up 131 points. They're going for it on the hope a deal is going to get done. But people all over the world weighing the debt ceiling crisis in the U.S., trying to figure out what's going on. Business correspondent Samuel Burke is tracking all of that. And Samuel, they've got to be befuddled, but this is certainly a talking point, isn't it, this morning?
It is, but it was interesting to see how many newspapers didn't have headlines about the shutdown or the debt ceiling, but there were plenty that did. This one, Ámbito Financiero, it's an Argentine business newspaper. It has the headline, going negative about the American debt, final negotiations. But the best part is this cartoon right here, which depicts President Obama panhandling on the streets of Washington, D.C. Maggie, let's go from South America over to Europe. This newspaper from Barcelona says in Catalan, agonizing negotiations, and then it says that Obama faces the final day. Very interesting headline there, but I want to show you some of the domestic newspapers. Let's start out with the Daily News here in New York, Maggie. It has the headline, Hero and Zero. Next to Hero, it has a picture of Obama bestowing the highest honor that you can give a soldier in the military. That was yesterday. And then here, you have a picture of the Republican leader, John Boehner, next to the word zero, and it says, Republicans fail to save U.S. from shutdown suffering. So not surprising from a liberal state like New York to see that type of headline blaming the Republican Party. And then you have the New York Post, which always has clever headlines and clever images. Brink of disaster, it says, and it shows Uncle Sam there on the brink of going over a waterfall. Maggie, you know I like to keep my eyes on social media. Interesting to note that in the top 10 trends worldwide, nothing about the shutdown, nothing about the debt ceiling. In the United States, it has entered the top 10 trends, but no rallying points, no crying points for people to rally around using hashtags, really.
Yeah, which is interesting, and it's something, by the way, that's probably not lost on the politicians. A lot of people saying they need messages of outright anger from Wall Street. No doubt they're also tracking social media. Do we have any sense why that is, Samuel? Is it just one of those issues that it's hard to sort of shrink into a hashtag? It doesn't lend itself to Twitter? Or is that young people are sort of disengaged from what's happening in Washington until we start to see the stock market tank?
There's a lot of political fodder on Twitter, but it just seems to be the usual blame game that we have here in the United States. But I did see a lot of tweets, people saying that we've been through this so many times before. You know, we've gotten to the edge on so many issues because of the U.S. Congress. So it seems to be just another time that we're almost on the brink, the way the New York Post put it.
We're getting numb to the nonsense, it seems. But again, not the case if we continue down this road. It's only happening now because people still feel like there's a buffer. All right, Samuel, thank you so much for that. I just want to bring you a last check of the big board. As I was speaking to Samuel, we saw those gains increase. We are now up 152 points. We will no doubt have a knee-jerk reaction that could be quite strong if we get a sense that a deal gets to the floor and starts to get votes. You could see those numbers increase. But again, a warning, this could change on a dime. If it looks like it falls apart, these gains will evaporate as quickly as we put them on. But the Dow right now up 153 points. Pauline?
Yeah, and the question is, even if they pass something in the Senate, will the House be able to pass it as well? And what will the Tea Party faction of the Republican Party actually do? Well, while we debate that, we do want to bring you some breaking news that's just come into CNN. Reports say a plane has crashed in Laos, killing at least 47 people. The plane originated from the capital of Vientiane and crashed in the Mekong River. These reports are from state media and also local witnesses. We will have much more on this story as soon as we get more details. In the meantime, that is it from the three of us and the rest of the World Business Today team. Thank you for joining us. CNN will stay on top of the debt ceiling crisis in Washington. We'll see you again next time.
In the business of bringing joy, Kirloskar goes much beyond enriching lives.
Connect the world, tonight on CNN.
exquisitely composed. Enjoy an outstanding flight experience in Austrian business class.
The table is set for you to get a different view of China.
Join me for an intimate and revealing discussion with people who know China better than anyone.
This month on China, cracking down on political corruption.
You mentioned for the Chinese Communist Party, fighting corruption is a matter of life and death. Why is it a matter of survival for the party? Why is it that critical?
It's a view from the inside out. On China, today only on CNN. CNN original series, Anthony Bourdain, Parts Unknown, Sicily.
Our octopus, cuttlefish, pancetta, vionata. Oh, that looks good. This juice. How do you say it in Italian? Swordfish. Looks like hell. Tastes like heaven. Smells good in here. Chin. Caponata. That's old school. That's Sicily right there.
Anthony Bourdain, Parts Unknown, Sicily.